Man, this last year has been challenging, and I know I keep bringing up this idea of healing, but that's pretty much the reason I'm making this channel, is to track the significant changes that have happened internally in order for me to become what to me feels like a more well-rounded man. The source of much of the challenge has been failure and expectations. So having an idea of the way things are going to go, and then them not at all turning out the way that I thought. Or believing so fully in my heart that I would obtain something specific in X amount of time. Again, that's an expectation. And a failure is, at times, getting there and realizing that what you expected didn't happen for some reason. I have felt embarrassed. I've felt alone. And one of the lessons that I realized more recently, as I look back on a lot of the challenges I faced this year, is humility. This topic, this idea of humility keeps coming up. And it was strange when it first occurred to me, because most of the time when we talk about humility, we're talking about it at the levels of success. And we have, there's this person, ourselves or somebody else, that has achieved something great, and they might have this ego or this air of self-righteousness about them, and then it's easy for us to have this general consensus that that person could use a dose of humility. And oftentimes life brings that and reminds us that we're human. I haven't noticed, or either in the realm of personal development as much, or within myself, the idea of humility at the levels of failure. And so this idea of this video came up, the thin line between shame and humility, because for me, where I've been learning humility is at the level of failure. And the way that's been occurring, and I'll say this in a more general sense about the path from idea to success, where this plays out is we start, when we have an idea or an insight, we start with this great amount of enthusiasm, this great amount of energy, and this idea of a really easy path to completing it. And so we set off with this curiosity, with this beginner's mind, and we start working feverishly on this idea. And then, like myself, we might face a challenge or face a failure. And oftentimes, in many men, I think at that moment, that failure occurs as shame. And if you're not completely familiar with this idea, shame is the emotion or the energy that there is something fundamentally wrong with us. And that's why things aren't going the way that we anticipated. And so this cycle that I've played out in my life, and that I think many men play out in their lives, is new idea, a ton of energy, curiosity, moving into the production of that idea, failure, shame, something is wrong with me, and then this period of a lull, of a depression, or just complete defeat and despair. Yeah, I mean, you can comment below if you're familiar with this pattern, but it's definitely been one that I've had to reconcile this year. Now, the thin line that I'm talking about, and we can use the phrase, I'm not good enough. The thin line that I have to walk in my mind when it comes to failure is shame is I'm not good enough, period. I'm not good enough. And then what else is there to do? I have to walk away. I'm not good enough. All right, so shame puts the blame on me, and it ends that sentence. Humility still holds the understanding that you are a human, that you may not have everything that it takes to get there, and that you also can learn and adapt. So shame being I'm not good enough, period. Humility, I'm not good enough. And the sentence continues because I don't have the help I need, because I haven't adapted in this way, because I haven't built this skill, because I'm tired. And there's just a number of ways that you can recognize your humanness in the failure and allow for growth in order for you to continue on that path towards that thing that you initially had so much energy to go towards. Now, the seemingly hard part here is getting that humility in there. It's like a wedge. So shame has been so driven into our system from such a young age. Before we're communicating verbally, we're being told what we can and can't do. As a baby, you maybe go and grab something and your parents swat your hand, or you get older and you do something wrong and they use shame to keep you from doing that. And I don't know, but I've been told, or I've learned through my studies, that shame, there are healthy doses of shame, and it totally makes sense. I'm a parent and I recognize that my kids need to understand that some things are wrong. And actually, now that I'm saying this, it's the distinction I've heard people make is guilt and shame, right? Because guilt is like I've done something wrong. Shame is I am wrong. And so there's a thin line there. But the point I'm making here is that it's been grooved into our nervous system. It's so easy for us as men to go straight to shame and say, I'm not good enough, and have this feeling of just being rotten. There's nothing you can do with this. I think Irene Lyon, she does somatic work. She talks about shame, and the idea is that I'm bad meat. And that totally landed for me. I was like, yes, I feel like I'm bad meat. I'm disgusted with myself at times when I fail. It's just so natural for us, right? And this humility piece is like a wedge. We have to work it in there little by little in order to make it past the point of failure and not continue this cycle over and over again with the next new idea, the next new idea. And I want to share a couple ways that I have, I had two ways, but there's really a third way that I want to put in here as well, that I have been able to insert humility into that pattern. So the first one is to slow down. It's easier said than done. The second one is feel. And the third one is to join a men's group. The slow down and feel piece, again, it's easier said than done, because even now as I say it, I'm like, man, there's probably going to be people who reject this. But so many times, energy enters into our nervous system, and it's just too much for us to handle. And because we can't handle the energy, we immediately eject. And I think I've touched on this in another video, but it's probably going to become a broken record because of how crucial it's been in my life. We feel a bunch of energy and we eject into some habit, some thought form, or some way of numbing and ignoring that sensation. The problem is this is a pattern that continually gets us further and further from what is truly happening within us and levels of our authenticity that are under all of these sensations. So we have to slow down and learn to rationalize that a sensation in our body does not necessarily mean that we're going to cease to exist or that we're going to explode into the ether if we feel it, and start to slow down that process of feeling an emotion and ejecting. You can do this in so many different ways. Meditation, breath work, physical activity like exercise, running, these types of things pull you into your body. And as you're there, begin to feel the sensations more. And as you do this, you take the steering wheel, even if just for a moment, from the habitual emotion or habitual pattern, and you get to hold the steering wheel. You're sitting in this emotion, you recognize that it's not going to kill you, and you see the pattern that you typically go to, where you start to think about how shitty of a person you are, or you go to some coping behavior, and you turn that steering wheel even just 1%. Honestly, that's what it feels like for me this past year, that I've had to, on a daily, weekly basis, feel the most uncomfortable feelings that have been stuck in my system for years, and just gently turn that steering wheel a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. But over time, the influence has been dramatic. Although I'm not completely through it, I recognize that where I typically go to, man, I'm just not good enough, period, and then just think about all the ways I'm not good enough, I now recognize that I'm human. I recognize that I'm not always perfect. I recognize that I'm only strong enough to do what I'm strong enough to do. That I only have a certain amount of energy, that I only have a certain amount of time, and I can rationalize these things so that I'm not constantly poking myself with this knife of disgust and shame. The other piece, in addition to that, like I said, was to join a men's group. And this actually happened, this created more impact in this realm for me before the feeling. I would have never gotten to the slowing down and the feeling if it wasn't for the men's group. And the way that this happened was, when you join a group of men dedicated to becoming the best men that they can be, many things happen. But one of the things that happened for me was, before that group, my failures were in isolation. So the only data I had about failing was my own experience. And so it's very easy, if you are a man who doesn't really talk about life and failures and success with anybody, to not have any other data points. When I joined a men's group, I was around people that I admired, people who had success that I felt threatened by, and I got to know all of these guys, no matter where I judged them to be against where I judge myself to be. And I started to realize that there's this thread through all of us, that we're experiencing the same things, no matter how much success we've had in our lives, perceived success we've had in our lives. And so the information that I was drawing from in terms of my own failures was not just my past anymore. It was the past and the present lives of many men. And it helped in numerous ways to rationalize the experience I was going through. And although it didn't take the edge off, it gave me a little bit more of a grip on that steering wheel. So these are just a couple ways. I'm sure there has to be ways that I'm not mentioning here, but these are just some of the ways that I in particular have come to, slice through the shame and break that pattern of getting excited about an idea, failing, quitting, finding the next idea, failing, quitting, and so on and so forth. As always, comment your insights, or if you have any challenges to anything that I've said here, I'd love to hear about it. Take care.